Welcome to the Book Party Podcast.
Join us as we journey into the world of books with Michael T.
Prepare to be captivated by engaging interviews, insightful discussions, and fascinating stories. You'll discover new adventures and gain insight into the creative process of the authors themselves as they share their struggles and accomplishments. Now let's hear from Michael T.
This is Michael T. Welcome to another exciting episode of Book Party Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of thrilling crime fiction. Today we have a special guest who needs no introduction to the world of crime fiction, author Frank Scalise. Frank Scalise is the mastermind behind the gripping River City series, the heart-pounding SpoCompton novels, the enigmatic Stefan Kopriva mysteries, and the adrenaline-pumping Sandy Banks thrillers. With a remarkable career as a police officer for 2 decades, retiring as a captain from the Spokane Police Department, Frank's unique perspective shines through in his writing, giving readers an authentic glimpse into both sides of the badge. Today, we're here to discuss his latest release, All the Forgotten Yesterdays, the 14th installment in the electrifying River City series. In this gritty police procedural, Detective Katie McLeod takes center stage as she navigates the dark and treacherous alleys of River City. Set in 2010 in the atmospheric backdrop of River City, Washington, Detective McLeod is thrust into relentless battle against the cunning burglar who preys on the vulnerable, cutting through the fabric of their lives. But that's not all. The plot thickens as a cold case resurfaces with political pressures mounting. As the clock ticks, Katie McLeod must strike a delicate balance between tracking down a dangerous burglar and uncovering the truth that's behind a woman's mysterious disappearance 5 long years ago. Secrets will be unearthed, alliances tested, and the line between right and wrong will be blurred. How far will someone go to protect their hidden truths? Today, Detective Katie McLeod is about to find herself entangled in a web of deception, danger, and redemption. So, dear listeners, get ready for an unforgettable journey into the world of All the Forgotten Yesterdays with the brilliant mind behind it all, Frank Scalise. Stay tuned as we explore the intricacies of this gripping crime thriller's intricacies to delve into the author's mind who brings these captivating stories to life. Let's welcome Frank Scalise to the Book Party Podcast without any further ado. So, Frank, why don't you take it from here, fill in some blanks, and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, wow, I don't know if I can follow that introduction. That was pretty awesome. I guess I'll start by saying thanks for having me on and for a really great introduction there. You covered all the bases, I think. I guess one thing I could say is that I do write crime fiction under a pen name, and that is Frank Zafiro. And so the River City series is written under that. So are the other books that you mentioned. I do write mainstream under my given name, Frank Scalise. So I wouldn't want people to go to Amazon looking in the wrong place. And I took that pen name actually while I was still on the job because I was still on the job and I was not sure how people were going to respond to me writing books, not all of which were public relations fluff or anything like that. There were some, gritty things going on in some of the stories. And so I took a pen name and I changed Spokane to River City. And I was vague in my bio. I was a police officer in the Pacific Northwest instead of being more specific and so forth. Interestingly enough, when it all came out, the administration at the time and for the rest of my time on the job, which was another 8 or 9 years, were very supportive. Other than that, I think you covered all the bases there. I had a 20-year career in Spokane. The one thing about the career that was interesting, I suppose, or different from what you get from some officers who are writing crime fiction is that I wasn't a homicide detective, period. Nor was I one for 18 years or something. And so you get some authors out there who have that incredible depth of knowledge that they draw upon, and that's wonderful. And I admire those folks, and I really enjoy their books. Someone, like Bruce Robert Coffin, for example, or Bill Powers, people who have been on the job and have specialized, and they know that area so well, way better than I do. They're who I call if I have a question. But in my career, I spent about the first half doing the job, and I spent the second half in leadership roles. And in the leadership roles, I was assigned to a bunch of different units, and as part of being assigned to command those units, I mean, I think you're a fool if you don't educate yourself on what those people do that you're, deigning to lead. You should probably know what the canine handler does and how the dogs work, or you should learn, about the SWAT team or the volunteer unit, or whatever you're commanding. And so I did get a pretty good breadth of knowledge, a little more than an inch deep, but I got that mile wide view of law enforcement. So I can write, with some authority about just about anything, as long as, my gaps don't start showing until you get to, a bit deeper into any given subject. So that's one of the ways that my career played out.
Yeah, I can understand having to use a pen name while you're on the job, because it would, you don't want some kind of conflict going on, while you're on the job, and get the wrong attention from the wrong places, while you're doing that, especially the administration. But, also the people that you're commanding at the same time as well. Anyway,
yeah,
on your I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add that, it was a big unknown at the time for me, because we had, like many agencies, an off-duty employment policy that was pretty strong. And if there was a nexus from the job you were doing or wanted to do off-duty to law enforcement, the department had the right to regulate that. And I don't know if writing crime fiction counts. I mean, there's obviously a nexus there. I'm writing about law enforcement, and I didn't want to be in a position where my bosses said, yeah, that's not good for PR, stop it. And I wasn't going to. So that was going to be a battle. And I figured I probably have a little bit more of a leg to stand on if it's Frank Zafiro writing about River City and not Frank Scalise writing about Spokane.
Very, very understandable. So on your publishing journey, which has been a very, very long publishing journey, starting out with book number 1 till now, have you ever taken the self-publishing route, or have you always went through a traditional publisher or something in between, like a hybrid publisher? Tell me about your publishing journey.
Well, I've done all three, actually. I started with a very small press in Georgia called Wolfmont Press. They published the first book under A Raging Moon in 2006. And then they didn't want to publish the second book because the victim in that book is a 6-year-old child who's kidnapped. And the editor didn't feel like people would respond to a child in peril sort of situation. I argued that he needs to probably watch CSI and SVU and a couple other shows that were on at the time to see the fallacy in that. But he didn't agree, and it was his publishing company. So I ended up signing with another small press for the second book. They're no longer in existence, but it was Kaboka Publishing out of Florida. And they overextended basically and published too many books at once and couldn't support them with marketing. So they went under. About that time, I got the rights back to the first book. And so I was sitting there in about 2010 with these two books and, third book ready to go and no publisher. And one of the frustrations I had with the first two publishers was one was in Georgia and one was in Florida. So I can't exactly go knock on the door and have, kind of force a conversation. And so if they're ghosting you, they're going to get away with it for a while.
Right.
Then I found a publisher right there in Spokane, Washington. Gray Dog Press was moving into fiction. And, I thought that'd be a good matchup, local author, local publisher, local setting. And so I went down and talked to Russ Davis there, the publisher and owner of the business. And he dug what I was doing and ended up buying the first two books and then publishing the third and the fourth one. And then they eventually decided they were done with fiction. It was too much. They wanted to scale back to what they were publishing initially, which was like trail guides and things like this. And even before that, they didn't want to publish ebooks. So I ended up publishing my own ebooks, which was my first experience in self-publishing around 2010. So I published the ebook versions, they published the print versions, and then another local company, Books in Motion, is an audio publisher. They did the audio versions. So I had essentially three different publishers for the series. Print was Gray Dog, audio was Books in Motion, and I was publishing the ebooks myself. And then, of course, I was publishing other works as well. And since I got some experience publishing them myself, I published other ones myself in their entirety, including the print version. And then when the Gray Dog Press said, "Hey, we're scaling back. You can have all your rights. You can have all the covers. We're just going to go back to doing trail books and a couple other nonfiction pieces." I was like, "Well, I'm already publishing the ebooks myself, and I got the hang of it. I'll publish the paperbacks as well."
You sure that all these places either going under or scaling back wasn't because of you?
Well, you do start to ask yourself that, I got to be honest with you. And the first publisher hung around for a while. They eventually, I think, stopped publishing quite a long time after I left. But the writing world and authors, just like all artists, are full of self-doubt, and we're our biggest critics. And so certainly when that was going on, I was like, well, maybe it's me. I can't carry a publisher. Well, carrying a publisher is pretty much too much to ask for any one writer if your name's not, Stephen King or someone of that stature, and even they might not be able to do it depending on the size of the publisher. So there I was, mid 2000 teens, and Down Out Books was coming on the scene, and I ended up going with them for quite a while. And they did a really good job with a number of my titles. They didn't publish my River City books, though. I kept those myself and continued to publish them under Code 4 Press, which is my own imprint. Ultimately, like a lot of small presses, Down Out Books wasn't doing a lot of promotion. Promotion and marketing is expensive. It's time consuming. And they just weren't really pushing things very much. I wanted to push more, but I didn't see the wisdom in pushing half my catalog or paying to push books that I didn't publish. And so I came to the decision to go 100% independent. And so at that point, I called up Down Out Books and told them, look, it makes sense if I'm going to do this to do all of them at once. And so I ended up buying back the contracts on all of those books except for a novella anthology series that I created and wrote and edited part of when other authors contributed. That stayed with them. And so then I republished everything under Code 4 Press. And so, so I went from traditional small press publisher to hybrid / traditional small press publisher to complete independent is where I'm at right now.
Wow. You went full circle on that one for sure. In your collaboration, though, when you talk about, editing and formatting and cover design and stuff, did you do some of this stuff yourself, or did you go in collaboration with others to do it? I'm talking about when you went independent, not with the others that have their own editing and design and stuff. When you went independent, how did you do that?
Well, cover designs, I contract for those. I don't have the artistic ability to create them. I'm pretty good at coming up with ideas, or at least general, specific enough ideas that the cover artist can do an even better job of getting me what I didn't know I exactly wanted. But so I contract with a few different folks for those, depending on the series and the title. Editing, I have a really unique arrangement with another author who I also collaborate with on a series, a police procedural series, the Charlie 316 series, and that's Colin Conway. And we essentially act as first line editors for each other. And so I guess it's uncredited. We don't put edited by in the credits or anything, but we do a pretty hard edit for each other on all of our work. And then I have a pretty extensive beta squad that I send it to once it's passed several revisions, including the post Colin revision. And, my beta squad is made up of folks who are, they all have different skill sets. I mean, some of them are just excellent copy editors. I cannot get, 99% of the mistakes don't get through any of them. Occasionally one does, and then somebody else manages to pick up that one. So it's a pretty good job. Others are more focused on story and character, and they come back with some interesting points about that they call into question. And so I get 6 or 8 folks usually per book that dive into that, and then I have another revision after that, and that's essentially my editing process. Very distilled and just a summary of it, but that's kind of how the process goes. And then the formatting, I do all the formatting myself. I learned how to do it, and in terms of the ebook and the print as well. So that is one thing I think that, you can't edit yourself entirely. You need outside editing, but if you're good at graphic art, you can make your own covers. I can't, but people can and do. And you can certainly learn how to format and save yourself some money there if you are able to do it to a professional standard. You don't want it to look. The problem with, I say independently published, and I think that's different than self-published. It's a distinction that I draw, and it's one of quality and professionalism is the only distinction, really. And a lot of people who are down on self-published books, I understand why, because there are some very, slapdash, poorly edited, terrible covers, bad formatting titles out there, and people have to wade through those to find ones that they like. I understand why they maybe aren't so thrilled with the idea and prefer to go with a traditional publisher, but independent publishers who are professional, who take the time to put together a quality product, they deserve your attention. And often you're going to get more reading value because their prices are usually slightly lower. You still need to pay for it, obviously, but you're not paying $8.99 for a paper or for an ebook. You might be paying $5.99, and that adds up over time as the reader. But again, it's a question of quality. Did you contract for a quality cover? Did you format it in a way that readers expect? This level of quality in terms of formatting. And certainly one of the most important parts is, has it been written and edited to a degree of professionalism? And that's what I provide. That's what other independent authors like myself provide. And I do think there's a distinction there between just, self-publishing.
Agreed. When I do mine, I call it self-published, but what I do is I have put together a team that where I get my editing and and everything put together with a team. And my first book, I tried to do a cover, and oh man, what a disaster that was. So I had to contract out to get my cover work done. And for the next 3 books, I use the same person as part of the team because she's fantastic. She's fairly quick at what she does. and she'll take whatever revisions I ask her to do, and she's really good at it. So let's get back to the. I'm sorry.
Well, and there's some shorthand that you develop when you work with a cover artist over time. I mean, now when you talk to that artist, you can just tell her, hey, make it like book 2, except I want it to, use this different image as the primary image. And can you change the color to a different shade of blue? And boom, you're there, whereas you probably have to do 6 or 7 times as much explaining if it was a different cover artist. And so,
well, exactly, because once you have the team in place and you start going book 2, 3, and 4, it's quick. Now you're fast.
Yeah.
And
they have a style
really
that they have, cover designers have a style just like writers or musicians have a style. And if your series is all done in the same style, that's a form of branding. And it's important. I think it's important for your book covers in a series to resemble one another in some fashion. I mean, they don't have to be carbon copies of each other, but they should be identifiable as, oh, that's a River City novel right at first glance. They shouldn't wonder, is this from a different series, or whatever. And so I think you're smart to do it the way you did.
Mine are nonfiction, and they're in a series of 4, but they're nonfiction and have to do with parenting and mainly parenting teenagers. But, one of them is generalized parenting. But anyway, in the yesterdays, what would you consider your worst author moment in dealing with that book?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know that I've had that question before. Worst author moment while writing All the Forgotten Yesterdays. Well, I don't know if this qualifies exactly, but the book opens with Katie McLeod taking a promotional exam. And so, it's a bit of a risk, right? I mean, you want to open your book with something exciting, and I tend to have some sort of action set piece in the opening chapter in most of the River City books. But here, she's taken a promotional exam. And so the challenge was, can I make that seem tense? Can I make that, seem like maybe not an action scene, but certainly not a boring scene? And I guess the toughest part of, the book was wondering if I pulled that off or not.
That's understandable. Then we go to what I call an epiphany moment. And I call it that because it happens when you're not writing. You can be doing anything else. You can be driving, you can go grocery shopping, you can be taking a shower, you can be going to bed, just whatever else you're doing. And all of a sudden, this bulb goes off in your head like, bam, this thought, this aha moment, this, man, I got to write that down. This has to go in my book. But you got to do it right now, because if you wait, that thought's going to fade and it just won't be the same if you try to do it later. You have a moment like that in All Forgotten Yesterdays?
I think so. I talk about this in the afterword, so readers get an inside look at the process a little bit. But I got anybody that tells you they don't read their reviews is lying. Everybody reads the reviews at some point. Most of us,
as you should.
I think so. If you're a professional, you're reading it you're looking for themes, you're looking for trends, are the good reviews highlighting the things that you want them to be highlighting, or the bad reviews making points that are valid that you can learn from. What I've discovered as an aside is that people who leave bad reviews far more often don't leave a written review. They just give you a 2 stars or 1 star or whatever. Very few leave written reviews, and often those written reviews are not very illuminating, unfortunately. Most boring book ever is not a very good review, because it doesn't tell the other readers like why it was boring, what was boring about it, because your boring might be my exciting. Maybe I love statistics, and I'm going to get just bowled over by the fact that it's a book about statistics.
Right.
or whatever. So I maybe a year ago or thereabouts, and the Amazon algorithm has done something with this that I can't find it now. But about a year ago, I got what I would call a negative review, not a bad review because it was fair and it was detailed, for the very first book, Under a Raging Moon. And, I wrote this book in 1995, and I was a 2-year police officer at the time. And so I had the viewpoints that you would imagine from, was a 28-year-old, 27-year-old man who was 2 years into a police career. And so I wrote an exciting police procedural, and it eventually was, pulled back out and reworked for publication in 2006. A lot of the people who have read it, they, point to the authenticity of it, the veracity of it. And that was one of the things I strive to do in this series, is to present realistic, if overblown and dramatized, crime fiction from the police perspective. Well, and I'm trying to avoid spoilers here, but there's a scene at the end of that book where one of the main characters, there's kind of 4 in that first book. Eventually, the main character of the series becomes Katie McLeod over the course of a few books, and she's still the core of the series. But at that point, it was kind of an ensemble cast, and one of the main characters, who's kind of a mentor figure, resolves the main bad guy problem of the book. And I wrote it in 1995 when I edited it again in 2005, and it was published in 2006. I never really stopped looking at it in the way that I looked at it when I originally wrote it. This review was a 3-star review that was very complimentary of the pacing and the characterization and the dialogue and everything. That was 5-star level, but there were some things that he said he would have 1-starred, and that was the actual events in the book. And he was pretty anti-police in a reasonable way. He wasn't crazy or anything, but he just, he didn't agree with the things that were going on, and he labeled, some of the actions as profiling, which they actually weren't, but I understand why he would say so. And banged on a couple other things that I didn't entirely agree with, but I could understand the perspective. And then he landed on the ending, and he said, this ending is, it's flat out murder. And I sat back in my chair when he wrote that, and I thought to myself, no, it's not. And then I've read the rest of his explanation for why, and I thought about it objectively. Now what, 30 years removed from the event or something. And I realized, holy cow, seen through a certain perspective, it is. You can't argue that it isn't. It really is. And so it totally changed my perspective of that character, right? And now somebody could see that character in a very different way. I mean, he's one of the stalwarts of the series. He's the veteran presence, he's the sage. He's the one that everybody tries to be, anybody that's been in law enforcement knows those particular folks. Actually, that's in any career field, right? So it made me start to think about, okay, well, who would see that way? Because certainly Katie McLeod isn't going to see it that way. This guy is her mentor and her hero. And she, for a long time thought she was going to essentially follow in his footsteps and career-wise before she ended up becoming a detective. But there's an IA lieutenant that works there who can't stand this character and a number of other characters. He's very sanctimonious, very self-righteous, very much thinks that all cops do are bad things, and he's there to catch them at it. Not a very good attitude for an internal affairs investigator, but fun to write. And so I had this scene in the book where she goes to talk to him about something, and he ends up throwing that back up in her face, and he reframes the events of the very first book here in book 14 now. He reframes these climactic events in the first book as as completely different than the way probably most readers read them, and certainly the way Katie sees it, and certainly the way I saw it for a very, very long time. And so it was this moment, you say epiphany, it was this kind of like, kind of was poleaxe, to be honest with you. I sat back in my chair and I'm glad that the guy wrote the review, and I'm glad that I'm at a stage in my life, a maturity level, both personally and professionally, that I could read it with enough objectivity to consider it rather than just go, oh, this guy hates cops. He just hates cops, or he's a troll or something like that, and just move on. It was more of an epiphany moment that, hey, everything in life is nuance. Everything in life is perspective. And, one man's hero is another woman's villain. And so maybe I need to think about that, and so that was a moment of epiphany that really ended up resulting in what one of my long-time beta readers noted was he thought it was the best chapter he's ever read of mine, and he's read probably 90% of what I've written. So kind of a long answer to your question, but it was a big moment of epiphany there. And it's one that will continue to resonate for the next several books, So because somebody wrote a negative review, not a bad review, because it was, it had merit and it was well thought out and it was explanatory. It just, wasn't a great rating. It was a 3-star. Because someone took the time to do that, it actually has had a pretty big ripple effect on River City itself.
Yeah, a little long answer, but it actually explained why. When you get those 1 stars and 2 stars and there's nothing to back it up with whatsoever, sometimes there's not even an answer. There's just 1 star and that's it. Mm-hmm. You got to just say, well, who did that? My competition or what? Just to try to bring your stars down. Anyway, what is the one thing that you are the most fired up about today? Share something you're excited about right now.
On the writing front or just in life or what?
No, on your writing front.
I'm pretty excited about this. It sounds kind of funny, but this science fiction story that I wrote recently that involves kind of, I guess you'd call it, it's not hard sci-fi, but it's not like Star Wars level stuff either. It's got, some actual science in it, but it involves, people going from Earth to a different planet to make first contact and then returning home. And the big piece to it that's interesting to explore is that even traveling at near light speeds, you're talking about hundreds of years. And then, of course, the way time dilation works, even more time passes for those people who are left behind. And so the idea of what would it be like if we got a message from another planet, and it was already 300 years old, and then we're going to take 300 years to get there. So by the time we arrive, it's going to be 650 years after those initial messages come. What would be waiting for us there? And then upon completion of that mission, whatever that is, what would we be faced with when we come back and it's been over 1400 years here on Earth? What would that impact be on those travelers, on those, military and science professionals? And it's been really fun because I've written probably 85%, 90% of my work has been crime fiction since 2004. And so when I occasionally delve into mainstream and write a comedy or dive into fantasy or science fiction, it has such a fresh taste to it that I get pretty jacked up over it, and it's unduly excited might be the word.
Well, that sounds like something that's going to be pretty interesting to read. This is Michael T. I invite you to go to bookpartypodcast.com, hit that subscribe tab on top, then scroll down to the icon of your choice, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Odyssey, where you can download and follow us there, and please leave a review. Don't forget to sign up for our weekly video newsletter to get the latest information on our upcoming shows. Okay, Frank, we're going to enter the lightning round. Now, this one's a little bit different. So instead of those long answers, this is 4 pointed questions for 4 pointed answers.
Got it.
So, so before you became an author, and you're talking a long time ago here, when you were just a couple of years on the job or whatever, what held you back from becoming an author in the first place?
Well, I think I always felt like a writer since I was really young, but what held me back from being an author was just the way the system's set up. I mean, you have to get past the gatekeepers, and I wasn't having any luck early on. So it just took a while and some persistence to get to that point.
Okay. When you started writing, what was the best advice you had ever received?
Gary Provost wrote a book called Make Every Word Count, and in it he suggested you find some other writers, 2 or 3 maybe, to become friends with, because not only will they give you practical help, but they'll give you emotional and spiritual help, because as he famously wrote, sometimes another writer will understand what the rest of the world does not.
It sounds reasonable. Share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
I'm a very fast writer, and I'm able to write for long periods of time when I'm motivated to do so. Other writers are studies of consistency, and I try to be that as well. But I think the trait that helps me a lot is when I'm dialed in to something, I'm almost OCD about it. I can write for a very long period of time and get a lot done in a short period of time.
Do you start with an outline and go from there?
I do now. I didn't used to. I used to be a see the pants guy, but I collaborated on about 15 books with other writers, and you can't pants it when you're working with another writer.
No.
And then I discovered the value of having at least a loose outline.
That wasn't one of my questions. I just threw that in there. Share an internet resource with our listeners that you use when you write. Usually just go to Google if I have a question. I know one. I mean, I use the Urban Dictionary a fair amount to make sure that I'm not misusing slang, or if I need some slang, that I want to be a little more unique in using a term. So the Urban Dictionary talks about naughty stuff that and works just like a dictionary, only it's about things that you probably won't talk about when you're at your mother's for dinner. Okay. Hadn't heard that one before. Okay, Frank, we're now going to go into the grand finale. So what I'd like you to do is take your time and tell our listeners about the All Forgotten Yesterdays.
Well, I think we've done a pretty good job of that. I mean, you nailed it in your intro. In fact, in your intro, you even said the Stefan Kopriva correctly, which is you got Kopriva and Scalise correct in one go. I mean, that's you should get a ribbon for that. Most people don't. I guess what I would say though is that the River City series has Katie McLeod as the core character of the series, but there are other characters as well. It's still an ensemble series, and throughout the 14 books so far, there's like three of them are short story collections, all set in River City, in which smaller characters get to be the main character for just a story, or main characters get some smaller pieces of their lives examined, or a small case that wouldn't be in the book examined, and so that's kind of fun. And then throughout the entire series, even though, like I said, Katie is the core character, other characters get to be part of that ensemble cast. And the beauty of that, and the pain of it too, I suppose, is that time passes. I mean, the series starts in 1995, and All the Forgotten Yesterdays takes place in 2010. So that's a 15-year in-universe time passage. Well, when somebody's already a 20-year veteran at the beginning of, book one, they're not going to be a 35-year veteran. They're going to retire at some point. And there are people who die, and there are people who have bad things happen to them and they leave the job, and there are people who get married, and and there's all these events that go on, and once you get to know these characters after the first couple of books, it's almost like extended family for me anyway. I mean, there's a wedding in the previous book at the beginning of the book, and a retirement at the end of it. And both of them, I think, had emotional impact. But if you've read the entire series, I think that the emotional impact is almost double, because you know what these characters have gone through to get to where they're at. And so as much as I like to push how exciting each book is, and action is part of the series for sure, the journey of the series as a whole is spending time with the different characters and seeing what they go through during the course of their lives and their careers. And I try to do that in a very human way. I want people to look at a police officer and see a person first, and a badge and uniform second. And that's not always easy and for people to do. And so hopefully if they read River City, in addition to enjoying themselves, they'll see officers that way as well.
That sounds fantastic. So, Frank, we thank you so much for being here with us today, opening up to us, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate this too. So remember, Frank's book, All the Forgotten Yesterdays, is available on Amazon. Again, this is Michael T. To all our listeners, I would invite you to go to bookpartypodcast.com and hit that subscribe tab on top. Scroll down to the icon of your choice, where you can find us on one of your favorite platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Odyssey. You can download and follow us there. And please leave a review. Don't forget to sign up for our weekly video newsletter to get the latest information on our upcoming shows. Until next time, keep reading, learning, and discovering the world through the pages of a good book. Book Party Podcast is owned and powered by MTM Legacy Publishing, LLC. This is Michael T. signing off.
You must not miss our next episode as we delve into a world of inspiration, entertainment, and thought-provoking insights. Join Michael T. on the next Book Party Podcast and experience a new adventure, a new story, and a complete immersion into the world of Pages Unveiled, Chronicles of the Writing Journey.